But thank you everybody for coming this afternoon. I know it's a beautiful Thursday afternoon, but we appreciate you taking the time to log on. Today is going to be recorded, so if you hear of any friends that weren't able to listen, feel free to pass on the info that it was recorded. I will send out the link to all juniors and seniors sometime next week. So for those of you that might not recognize me, I'm Allison Lockridge. I'm the College and Career Counselor at the high school. And with our help of our amazing PTA, we have a great panel of alumni from GHS who are current students from all over the country today. And they'll be giving you a firsthand look at their campus lives. So we're going to ask, well, we have a number of questions that were already presented to us, but we really encourage all of you to ask questions throughout the webinar. And if you can use the Q&A function instead of the chat, that would be great, just so I can keep track of all those questions coming in. And I'd like to go ahead and just start with introducing our panel today. So I'm going to start with Nick. Nick is a rising junior at Bucknell, as you can see in his background there. He's a business analytics major with a philosophy minor. Nick is involved in many intramural sports. He's the captain of the club tennis team, and he's involved in Greek life. And we have Kate, who's a rising junior at UCLA, so all across the country. She's a communications major and a global studies minor. Kate is an account executive at Bruin Media Group, a UCLA athletics marketing intern, and also involved in Greek life. Jackson is a rising sophomore at Princeton. He's undecided with his major, but intends to study something within social sciences, and he's a recruit on the golf team. And we have Jadelle, who is a rising sophomore in the honors program at UConn Stores. She's a double major in psychology and human development and family sciences with a minor in sociology. Wow, that's a lot. Jadelle is a John and Valerie Rowe Health Professional Health Scholar. She was a Day of Pride scholarship recipient, which is very exciting. She's involved in community service, and she's active in attending on-campus cultural events. And finally, Ava is a rising sophomore at Northeastern. She's recently declared psychology as her major, and she's also involved in Greek life and active in community service. So thank you, panelists, for joining us on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. And we'll go ahead and get to the first question. So we'll go ahead and start with a few questions that came in, and then we'll open it up. So feel free to post anything in the Q&A function as you wish. Okay, so the first question, your first year of college is an exciting time. You have the real opportunity to make decisions on how you want to make these next 4 years your best years. Yet we all remember some mistakes or maybe some poor decisions that we might have made in those beginning years. Can you talk a little bit about a mistake or maybe a poor decision that you made and what you learned from it? We'll go ahead and start with maybe Nick.
Yeah, sure. So, this might be kind of a stereotypical one, but I think kind of branching out and being more social than maybe I'm comfortable with, especially in, first semester at school was definitely something that I wish I had done more of. I was very focused on school and schoolwork, and, it didn't really take a lot of time to try and reach out and meet new people, which might have been a little bit more uncomfortable for me. But I think now, looking back on it, I wish I had done more of that. Also, I would say, looking back at kind of the introductory courses that you take your first year, more or less introductory, unless you place out of some stuff, definitely wish I had focused more on those, because, if you take advantage of those introductory courses, you can set yourself up with, a solid GPA the first semester or two, and I think it'll be really helpful.
Yeah, kind of similar to that. I think the mistake I would say I made the most my freshman year was I made friends quickly that I loved, and so I was just comfortable with that, and so I kind of just stuck to them, and I didn't really meet as many people as now I think I should have. I was also definitely spent way too much time in my dorm room. That's like one piece of advice I would give incoming freshmen is like, don't spend too much time in your dorm room. Find somewhere else to study, find somewhere else to eat. Like, I love my roommates. That's why I spent so much time there, but I wish that I had even spent time with them just outside of the room.
Jackson?
Yeah, so thinking about like one in particular mistake I would make is very early on when I got there, I was very eager to kind of do whatever was like out there in terms of like social activities, just because that's like one of the first things you want to do is like go have a bunch of fun when you get to college. And like early on, I almost missed the like first practice that our coach had put together for just the freshmen. I'd been out late the night before and missed set my alarm, all this stuff, and it like kind of set in. Just like when you get to college, obviously you want to have a lot of fun, but it's also important to like really like set up boundaries for yourself in terms of scheduling and like being sure you can get to all your commitments and like being able to balance everything. Just because like I had to learn that lesson early on, almost missing a practice and all that. So yeah, it's definitely important to just be able to sort of keep yourself in check with scheduling and making sure that you know what time you have to be anywhere, any place. So yeah, it's definitely something I had to learn early on.
I think for me, more on the academic side of things, it was definitely a hard transition to make, going from like the high school workload to like big lecture classes. And I obviously started taking like honors classes that are slightly different in college. And when I did start struggling a little bit, I think my biggest mistake was not like asking for help or going to the resources that we were told about. Because either I was like too shy to go or like didn't know where they were. I think that if I had asked for help, it would have made like the academic side of things a little bit easier. But then definitely like starting to change that in my second semester, I did see good results. So that was, I think, my mistake for first semester.
Kind of to reiterate what Kate and Jada, like a combination of what they were both saying, for me, I would definitely say that first semester I did get a little too comfortable with like a typical routine and typical friends and professors that I would see, whatever. And so I would definitely recommend to go out of your comfort zone and to definitely use the resources that professors are offering for you, random lectures on campus that you could attend, things like that, to kind of break up your team, meet more people, and get like the full academic experience that you're at college for.
Great. And Jadelle, you mentioned you're in the honors program. I you could expand more about what that looks like. I know I get that question a lot.
So for UConn particularly, basically when you apply, I think there's a specific deadline that you have to apply before to be automatically considered for the honors program. And so with your acceptance, they'll tell you if you've been accepted into the honors program. And your first year, you live in 2 dorms that are just honors kids. So, and like there's a dining hall in one of the dorms. So you pretty much only see each other, which was also kind of like a mistake that I made. I kind of only stayed in those 2 buildings in terms of friends. And then you're required to take, I think, 6 credits. So that would be 2 classes that are honors. And then there's like different sort of activities and like different, like there are seminars that are given, different like class picking things. So different events that you go to and you write a reflection on them, and you get credit for those reflections that then count towards your graduation. So there's a list of like events that you have to go to by the end to graduate with just honors, and then kind of stuff like that. You do a thesis your senior year, and yeah.
And what about housing? Are you housed with all honors students?
You're housed with all honors students the first year, and then you can opt to continue in honors housing. So for me and my roommate chose to leave honors housing because we didn't like the locations of where the dorms were. But that being said, you can still walk into whether it be first year housing to go see certain advisors and stuff like that. So basically living in these honors buildings help you find people who are like in your honors classes and make that transition easier, as well as having the advisors downstairs and different resources available. But as you move up in terms of honors housing, like a lot of people end up leaving. You can always apply back in, but yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, let's see. In your first year, you will be encouraged to try new things as a way of getting involved and meeting new people. Can you talk about how you found ways to get involved and how you met the friends that you have today?
So one thing that Bucknell does great, and I'm sure a bunch of other schools do as well, is in terms of orientation and kind of the first week or so of school, they had us do a lot of activities and staying very close with our kind of floor on our building. So we did a lot with them. And so that was kind of my first set of friends, other than my roommate, of course, who I spent a lot of time with. But I think kind of reaching out and trying to join maybe a club that you might be interested. It doesn't have to be something that you think you're going to do for all 4 years of college, but just something that maybe piques your interests, maybe is something, maybe just to, find some new friends or meet some new people. I joined club tennis pretty early my freshman year, and that was a great way to meet some people that, I still play tennis with nowadays and I still talk to now. So I think kind of branching out and trying to find maybe a club or some sort of activity to do with other people that other people like to enjoy is a great way to find friends and kind of the people that you share interests with.
So for me, UCLA rushes as soon as we get to school before our classes even start. So that was how I made my first friends. And then from there, I had a really social dorm, which was super fun. So as much as you can, try to go to dorm events or just introduce yourself to people in the first week of school. It sounds so strange. And when you get there, it is a little strange, but everyone's happy just to meet a friendly face. So just introduce yourself to the people on your floor, and then when you see each other around, they'll recognize you, and then you can become friends. And that's how I made my friends outside of Greek life.
Jackson?
Yeah, I think just to reiterate what Nick and Kate have said so far, I think just like it's a mindset thing in terms of like being open to meeting new people, and like as straightforward and as easy as that sounds, like it might be hard at first to try to like encourage yourself to just make friends whenever possible. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but just like the simple act of like saying hi to people when you see them, even if you don't know them well, just so that you can like sort of build rapport with people. That's huge. And also just like they were saying, being open. There's like you go into the dining hall and you're not with like those few friends that you made really early on. Just go sit with somebody that you might have met once or twice and spark up a conversation. It's as easy as that. And I know just from certain interactions like that, it goes a long way, not only for the person that you like had that lunch with, but also just like sort of the vibe that people get off you. Like if you give off positive energy, like people are going to want to talk to you, and that goes a long way. So I think that's sort of like taking that mindset to just being open to people is really key if you want to try to build friendships.
I also think that like one of the big things that our RA reminded us is that everyone feels as awkward as you do, and like it's a transition for everyone. So like there will be some people who are more comfortable with just coming up and introducing themselves to you, but even if that's like not something that you are comfortable with, kind of like how I am, what I did is I just like stalked a bunch of like UConn related like the cultural centers or certain like departments on campus that were having events like the first week of school. So the cultural centers were having like tours where you got to see like what happens in each cultural center and stuff like that. And so that's how I ended up meeting people that like had similar interests to me. But also I agree with like the club thing and also being involved with the dorm stuff. Like I know that at UConn, the first weekend that you get there, you basically like spend most of your time with the people on your floor, and like some of the events are optional, but I think it's super important to go to them because that's how you create those like closer friendships, especially with the people who you live with.
So at my school, we had an orientation that lasted a couple days, like weeks before you actually come to campus as for your first year. So I met a lot of my like first friends there. And then when we all came and moved in and started school, we all like kind of met up and brought each other's roommates and other people that we'd met on our floor or in our building. And that's kind of how we all like started creating friends. But I would also just note, obviously this doesn't apply to every school, but for a lot of schools in like the East Coast or places that will get cold in the winter, I would definitely take advantage of the warm weather when you get to campus, because you'll see a lot more students just like out and about on campus. And that was a really good way for me to meet people. We had like a lot of events outside or just like people on the lawn, like playing spike ball, like pick up a ball, go play with them, like things like that was a really great way to like casually meet people and not like force any kind of friendship. And that definitely would be harder to do once it gets colder and everybody's stuck in their dorms. So
Very good advice. So a couple of you mentioned club involvement. At some colleges, clubs are selective to join. I'm just wondering if any of you have had experience with that, if some clubs on your campuses are competitive to join, and if you can comment on that at all.
Yeah, I feel like I have some experience with this. So my involvement in school is mostly with like internships and jobs, but it's kind of similar. At least at UCLA, since we're such a big school and everyone is so involved, and that's how they got into UCLA. Everyone wants to be part of clubs. So we do have application processes for the more competitive clubs. I don't really know how to phrase that. That's more kind of a pre-med thing. Most clubs have an application and you can get in as long as you show some interest. Like, for example, one of the clubs I'm in is Undergraduate Business Society. And as long as you go to a meeting and just introduce yourself to someone, then they'll let you in because they know that you want to be involved and go to their events. And they're just looking for like active students. A lot of people just want things for their resume. So they'll just apply to a million clubs and then not really go. So they're more like the more academic clubs have that vibe. And then I also did club swimming my freshman year. And so I would say the sports clubs, you just go to the first practice and you're in. You don't even have to be good. Like they accept everyone and it's really fun.
Anybody else have any experience with that?
yeah, for us, we have a really big like club fair right when you first get to school. And so that was like a super easy way because I didn't realize like the different levels of like commitment each club wants. And there's a really like big range between clubs. But there's obviously like so many that like you can definitely find a club with like the type of commitment you want for whatever subject, academic, club, whatever, like you can find it. So I would definitely recommend going to, if you have any kind of club fair at your school, because then you'll get just like the best way to see every type of club offered to you. And for us, for sports, I don't know if it's like different at different schools, but a bunch of my friends are on the club lacrosse team. And it's actually very competitive, and they had to like go to like midnight tryouts and like crazy things like this, and like a bunch of people got cut. But our intramurals are very similar to what Kate was saying, where like you can just show up, make a team, and like play a pickup game kind of thing.
Great. Okay, we have several questions around what it's like to live with a roommate and how you found your roommate. So whether that was through, did you pick your roommate in advance, did you do a random selection? So if anybody can just comment all about dorm life, living with a roommate, and the selection process, that would be great.
So for Bucknell, there was you kind of didn't pick your roommate. It was more of a survey, as I think maybe most schools do. I'm not sure. So you would kind of put in when you go to bed, are you kind of organized, 50 questions of kind of who you are and how you live. But I think I got lucky, and I think most people get roommates that they enjoy spending time with, and they enjoy being around, and they become your friends kind of throughout college, which was my case. But even if you get a roommate that is maybe not you kind of don't get along with, or they kind of don't hang out with the same people as you, it's still very manageable. There was many people on my hall that kind of had some roommate issues. If it's really, really bad, you can always switch rooms. But I think, if you're able to manage with pretty much everyone. I think hall life is kind of a little weird at first. I know, especially kind of taking showers with shoes was weird. But you get used to it pretty fast.
To answer the question about how I found my roommates, mine was not random. I chose mine. I had two. And I joined the Facebook group, which I'm sure many of you have done or will do. And some people post a little bit about themselves, some pictures. But I didn't even know this was a feature until I was just playing with it, but I went to the members of the group and you can see who you have mutual friends with. And I actually had a mutual friend with someone from Greenwich High School, with one of the girls. So I followed her on Instagram and reached out to her that way. And she had already had a roommate, and I actually had an extremely good experience with both of my roommates. They're still my best friends. But also, just a little bit of advice, just because you love your roommate or roommates, don't just be friends with them and don't do everything with them. Like, we literally would have every single meal together, and I don't recommend that. I loved them, but it would have been better if I had branched out a little bit at the beginning.
Great advice.
I
Jackson?
personally, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Jada. That's good.
Okay, so I chose my roommate from home, so she went to Greenwich High School, and like I am torn between whether I recommend it or don't recommend it, because obviously we had known each other and had been friends for a while before we decided to room together, and like being roommates with one of your friends is a completely different level of friendship, and because you both already like trust each other and like know a lot about each other, there might be some sort of like boundary issues sometimes. I feel like she, like, let's say she would want to sleep at a certain time where like I'm still up, and like both of us are just like too nice to each other or like love each other too much to be like, okay, like go to sleep, like it's late. So I think that when it comes to sort of like being roommates with someone that you have been friends with before, it's kind of a hard thing to do. Like, I love her, we're rooming together again this year, or our sophomore year, but it definitely was an adjustment, and like we had to kind of had those hard conversations where we would have to discuss like what's not cool and what is. So I think that like even if you do know your roommate and like you pick them, if it was like you connecting through social media or someone that you know in person, it is still difficult to have those discussions and establish boundaries. But like you get used to it and you sort of pick up on each other's schedules, and like you know when one person's in the room and when the other isn't. So I think it's just like an adjustment sort of.
Yeah, just to echo what Jaydell said. I mean, my roommate, I had 3 roommates. I had applied to be in a quad. The only thing at Princeton you do in terms of roommates for freshman year is apply like what size room you want to be in. But you don't get to pick at all. It's just all random. And so I had never met any of my 3 roommates. And to be honest, like we were all very different people. Like especially me and my direct roommate had like very like opposite sleep schedules and like opposite schedules in general. So that was a little challenging at first, just trying to like get used to like being in the same room with somebody, and like if I have to wake up before he's still asleep, like it can get challenging at times, but just trying to respect like other people's like boundaries and like being upfront about it. Like we weren't very upfront about it, to be honest. Like we just kind of like let it go, and as conflicts came, we dealt with it. It wasn't the best situation, but I definitely think that you get used to it no matter what your situation is. And definitely like having conversations is probably a good thing to do, especially if you have very different schedules. That's something I probably wish I had done more with my direct roommate.
Ava, any other comments there, or are you good?
Yeah, I mean, I picked my roommate through a Facebook group, pretty similar to how Kate did. And then after I saw her post on Facebook, reached out to her on Instagram, the whole thing. I'm sure a bunch of you are starting to do that. Um, the only advice I would say, especially like at the beginning when you're just starting to like get to know each other and how each other like wants to live in the same space, our RAs actually made us put together like a contract of like what we expect from each other and like what's okay and what's not okay. And in my opinion, I would definitely recommend to get that out of the way like before you guys become friends, because it's not really awkward at that point. You're kind of just like, okay, hi, we just met, like this is what I'm expecting and this is what you're expecting, and then you get it out of the way, and then like we're best friends now and it works great. We're rooming together next year. So I would definitely recommend doing that sooner than later.
Great. So we have another question about Greek life. So I know a few of you are involved in Greek life. Could you talk about how you got involved and what it's like being in a fraternity or sorority?
So for Bucknell, you rush beginning of the year, sophomore year. So you have a full year, your freshman year, to kind of get acquainted with what Greek life is, what it means to be a part of Greek life. But I think it's also, there's pros and cons. The cons would be, if you rush right away, you kind of instantly get this, and you get into a fraternity, you kind of instantly get this big network of friends that, makes it maybe easier to transition into college. But I think kind of understanding what Greek life really is about is also good in terms of waiting a year. So I rushed this past year, and I got in, and it's been great. You kind of your network, like I said before, kind of expands, instantly. And I love all the guys that are in the fraternity, and it's not like some people might think that kind of fraternity to fraternity are kind of like rivalries, and they don't like each other. But I have friends in pretty much every fraternity on campus. So I think you'll find, if you really want to join Greek life, you'll find the right fraternity for you, or sorority.
Okay.
Yeah, I could talk about Greek life for a long time, but I would say, like, to sum it all up, I rushed as soon as I got to school. Rush is definitely a little bit stressful for girls. A lot of talking about yourself, which some people might not really like to do. But the only advice I would have for that is just like be friendly, be positive. Things generally work out. And then in my sorority, well, I actually currently live in my house, and that's also been a really positive experience. I'm trying to think. Oh, my sorority has been very helpful in terms of getting jobs. That would definitely be one of the things that I would say is a huge pro of joining Greek life, is as being part of your sorority, you have not only connection to people at UCLA who have connections, but also nationwide. We have all of these databases and people to email and people who come speak at our house and give advice. So it's been really helpful for networking. And also we have a really good test bank. So academically, it is helpful.
Great. And I think, Ava, you're involved in Greek life as well, right?
Yeah, so I actually rushed similar to Kate, like my fall semester, my first year. And I wanted to do it like sooner rather than later because I saw it as a really great way to meet a lot of new girls. The only advice I would give about like the rushing process, regardless of like what time or when you do it, would kind of be like you're definitely going to hear about Greek life when you get to your school, no matter like how big or how small it is at your school. And you'll definitely hear like certain stereotypes or things about each sorority or each fraternity. And for me, something that I thought was actually like really crucial to like me finding my sorority was me knowing nothing about it going into it, because I didn't have any like bias towards anyone. I wasn't really like thinking in the back of my head while I was having conversations with girls like, oh, this is what people say. Like, So I think it's really important to kind of go into it with like your own head on your shoulders and just take every conversation as it comes to you and make your own opinions about every sorority or every fraternity. And if you go into it with a bunch of friends and you guys end up ending in different sororities, like good for you. That's a whole other sorority you can now be friends with. Like definitely don't try and just follow your friends. Like it's really important to know what you want and what kind of people you want to surround yourself with. And I love it. And it's been really great with me so far. Yeah.
Great. So, Kate, you just mentioned working. There were a couple questions around kind of how do you balance work with school? And I'm not sure if anybody else works on campus or off campus, but if you can maybe just comment on if you do have a job and how you manage that.
Yeah, so I do think that UCLA is a little bit unique because we're on the quarter system. So we only take about 3 classes at a time. So we have a kind of a lighter schedule, I would say, compared to semester schools. Therefore, a lot of my friends have jobs or internships. I spoke about, so my advertising job, I sell the advertising for Daily Bruin, which is our newspaper. And I got into that because some girls in the grade above me in my sorority just made an announcement at chapter and were like, please apply to this. And so that was how I got involved in that. And I work for that 10 hours a week, which is completely manageable. And then I also work for athletics in the marketing department, and that is less of a commitment. I work at game days, which is, it adds up to around 6 hours a week, but I basically make time for that. I just have to do my schoolwork after dinner, which sometimes some of my friends don't do because they're getting ready to go out, but there's actually enough time to do both. And also, I try to wake up early, which a lot of college students don't do, to help me like get my day started. And that's basically how I fit my job into my academic life.
Great. Anybody else want to comment on work? So I did have a question for Jackson about just being involved in a D1 sport and managing that with academics. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's very similar in the sense that a time commitment's a time commitment. I mean, we have workouts early in the mornings on 2 days a week, and then we're playing on the weekends. Golf's fall and spring, so we, like, right when we get there, we're playing basically every day up until end of October, and then we pick back up with real practices in February. So yeah, I mean, for the majority of the year, it's just trying to make sure I'm on top of my schedule, especially with academics. I mean, what's helpful is that with the golf team, we're able to practice. We don't have to practice as a team all the time. So during the week, our coach lets us practice when it works with our academic schedule, which is really nice. I know it's not the same for all teams, but nevertheless, just being able to like map out your weeks is definitely big. Know when the big deadlines are. Cause I mean, that's just a theme in general in college, is that like, you're not going to have like weekly tests a lot, but it's going to be like a lot of stuff that you have to plan out through the semester and then just be ready when those due dates come. And so I guess having a sport just sort of puts more emphasis on being able to plan that out. But in terms of like being able to manage the day to day, yeah, I mean, you just get into a rhythm, you get into your sort of what you need to do throughout your day in order to stay on top of things. And then it just becomes sort of second nature.
Yeah, and then Nick, you're on the club tennis team, captain of the club tennis team. How, what type of commitment is a club team, would you say?
So it's kind of as big of a commitment as you want it to be. In the beginning of the year, there's probably about 50 kids that show up. It's twice a week for an hour and a half, from like 6 to 7:30. So when it gets dark, they put on the lights for the courts. But in the beginning of the year, there's like 50 to 70 kids that show up to a practice, so it's pretty packed. And then it kind of gets down to like 10 to 20 by the time like it starts getting a little cold. And it's totally okay for you to come to one practice in the fall, or you can come to every, it's the more the merrier, but there's no specific time commitment if you want to be a part of the club tennis team. And then we usually have one tournament a semester where we go to a different school and play there. And again, you can do that if you want. We are selective in that, so we only take 6 to 9 kids on the trip. But it's totally up to you. If you have work that night and you can't come to the practice, that's not a problem. But if you want to, that's awesome. So it's kind of totally up to you and your schedule.
Great. So we've talked a lot about some social aspects. So we have a number of questions around academics, and just knowing all of you, you were in very rigorous courses at Greenwich High School. How hard is college compared to high school? Anybody can answer that.
From my personal experience, I found that it depends a lot on like what kind of classes you're taking. Like my first semester, I was taking similar like types of classes that I took my senior year in high school. Like I was taking a language course, I was taking an economics course, which I took my senior year in high school. I was taking a social sciences course, sociology, which is very similar to some of the other social sciences you can take at Greenwich High. And I found that a lot of the material is similar in terms of like the basic concepts. It's just that you start to get more and more in depth the farther you go into whatever you're studying. And so that can be challenging. But I found in terms of like the difficulty, if you're thinking about like trying to get the same grades, the challenge is that you're just not going to be submitting as much work for grades. So you have to sort of be able to know without getting constant grades to tell you how you're doing. You have to know sort of how well you know the material going into like a midterm or a final. So you just have to be able to like take that sort of like self-check on like, okay, do I actually know what I'm doing? And if you don't, then you just got to reach out to your TA or whatever the class provides in terms of a smaller group so that you can get the help you need. I think that's, if you're able to do that and you're able to self-advocate for yourself without having to know like week by week what you're getting in terms of grades, then it's not going to be like way harder than what you've experienced before, in my opinion.
I definitely agree with that. Like one of the weirdest things for me going to college was you just get a syllabus the first day and they don't really even reference it always. Like you'll just have things due and you need to know when they're due, and it's mainly just 2 big tests, like a midterm and a final, or 2 big papers. Like you just need to just keep up with your readings. I definitely did not do that in high school, and I didn't really need to, but in college I thought I could get away with that, and that is not the case. You need to just have a planner. I did not have one in high school. I was not used to that aspect of school. I was kind of used to just like paying attention in class, studying right before a test, and that was how I did well. And that's just different in college. You need to not only go to class, but actually pay attention to the readings assigned outside of class so that you can, as Jackson said, stay on top of things.
I think I would say, kind of going off that, the biggest thing for me was the planner. I mean, I would have, month by month, and that would be me keeping track of my big assignments like papers, exams, when things were due. And then I'd also have a day-to-day of what I needed to get done, how many, those assignments for the day. So kind of mapping out what your week looked like, what the month looks like, what just that day looks like is huge in terms of staying on top of your assignments, because professors are not always the greatest in telling you, oh, something's due in a week. They just expect that that. And, a planner is huge in terms of kind of keeping track of everything. But it can be sometimes.
I just wanted to also add, for me, something that like I didn't realize going into college. I was expecting it to be super hard and challenging, and I was kind of nervous for all of my classes, but something that I didn't really take into consideration was that I went in undecided, but now I've declared my major, and when you declare a major, like you're picking what you want to study. So all of your classes should be classes that you're interested in some extent or are curious about. So for me, a big difference with like my college classes and my high school classes are I actually care a lot more about what I'm learning in my college classes. And for me, it kind of just came much more naturally in how I study and how I'm listening in class, taking notes in lectures. So I feel like definitely get the plan or do like focus on your work, but don't be like that nervous because hopefully the classes you're taking are going to be ones that you're really interested in and you want to learn about.
I would say also just add, oh, Jada, do you want to say something first?
Yeah, sure. Just quickly, I think that it like kind of depends on what class you're in, and a lot of it has to do with the professor. Because I know that I took the Intro to Bio course. The professor's not everyone's cup of tea, so it was kind of a challenging class. Like the material obviously was a little bit more in depth than what you would learn in like an AP Bio class, but because the professor taught in the way that he did, a lot of it would fall on the students to go and like learn. So you have to be, again, like everyone said, very mindful of the time that you're putting towards like specific classes. Because I had a class that like I literally could give like 30 minutes to, and my work for 2 weeks could be done. So I think a lot of it is being mindful about what classes you're picking when you first get there. And I made the mistake of piling in like 3 STEM classes in one semester, and like all of them were very demanding in terms of my time. So I think that it's important to sort of like space that out, but also like know that a lot of it's on you, because like assignments aren't going to be due the next day, like the day after that they're assigned. They're going to be due a super long term, so you have to be very like paying attention to that.
What I was going to say was, you know, if you're coming in freshman year, you're probably not going to have a job on campus freshman year. Maybe, you know, maybe you apply for one, but I would say when you get there and you're first starting classes, you know, if you're not an athlete, you do have a lot of time. You know, classes are really only, you can have classes ranging from, you know, just an hour and a half on that one day to, you know, probably 4 or 5 hours at the max. Obviously, it depends on how many classes you're taking and, you know, the quarter system versus semester system. But you do have more time than you think you're going to have. So, you know, it's not like if you have a lot of work, you're not going to find the time to do it. There's a lot of time in the day when you get to college.
Just one last thing also on the note about it being a lot about your professor, whether or not a class is good or bad. For me, joining a sorority early was super helpful in that aspect because I could ask the older girls, like, has anyone taken this class? Who's a good professor? But if you don't know anybody or have that kind of resource, my advisors also were really helpful going into my first semester. And I was just asking like, okay, like, do they have good reviews? Like who's good, who's bad? And also the website Rate My Professor, I've seen to be pretty accurate in my experience, but definitely check who your professor is when you're looking for a class.
Yeah, and just tacking on to that, like Princeton has its own like rate your professor kind of thing. And so it's definitely worth it to look to see if whatever school you're going to has something like that. Because I mean, that's like the Bible at Princeton. Everybody checks the rating on Princeton courses as to like what they're taking and what they're getting themselves into. So definitely getting as much information as possible about like the class that you're going in, not just going into it based off, oh, the title sounds cool. It's really important.
And just to add to that, I know most of you were in a lot of AP classes. Did any of you use AP credit to advance in courses, and any advice around that?
I personally completed my language requirement with my AP credit. I finished like first year English, and then I chose to like not transfer credits in for like the grade. So I kind of like, well, because I did so like ECE. So when I took AP Bio in high school, I chose to audit the grade and take it again my freshman year, just for like another shot at like a better grade. So I did that as well as transferring in credit.
For me, I also did EC and my AP credits from high school. And for what I found was it actually was super helpful because I came in with like about a year of credits and a lot of them went towards our like core curriculum. So we have like NU Path credits and almost all of them were filled by me going in with my APs. So right away, I got to start taking classes for my major and for my minor and things that I was interested in instead of having to do random liberal arts requirements.
Yeah, I think the way Princeton operates with AP credit is you can't use it as like a credit to a course taken at Princeton, but you can get out of intro level classes. But through my experience, like I had taken AP Econ in high school, but then I decided to just take intro to econ again in the fall, just because I mean initially I thought I was definitely going to major in econ, so I wanted to sort of double up to really know if I knew it. And then one of the biggest takeaways I learned is that what you cover in AP econ or AP whatever is probably not going to cover everything that the school is going to like expect you know in the subject. So if the situation is similar to the school you're going to where you can get out of intro level courses, but you might not necessarily be able to use it for course credit, I highly recommend just taking the intro level classes because you'll just end up having a better understanding of what the class is. And also it might be somewhat easy early on just because you have familiarity in the subject. So I highly recommend not skipping intro level classes just based off having AP credit, unless you can knock out some base credits that you're not going to like pursue in that subject.
Okay, let's see. Time for a couple more questions. I think this one's an important one to ask. How has the current pandemic we're all in right now affected you? Maybe you can talk about how your transition has been to distance learning, and has your college communicated to you about any plans that are being developed for fall semester?
So for Bucknell, transition to kind of remote learning was, I think, one, most of my professors just went straight to Zoom, and we did, the first class, we just kind of talked about what the rest of the semester was going to look like. And, for one of my classes, the exams were taken away because they wouldn't have been effective from home. So they just added a couple projects. But then my professors kind of realized that Zoom would sometimes not work for people in different time zones. So they went to recorded classes, and you can kind of watch them whenever. And it was helpful in terms of not having to wake up super early for a class. But I think recorded classes are kind of a challenge in terms of asking the professors questions, or if you're not too sure about something, asking them questions, or but they were actually pretty good at giving you options. So I think for all my classes, you could just request to do a private Zoom call and kind of go over anything you wanted to. So that was good. Exams were interesting in terms of not your usual format. So like for a bio class that I was taking this semester, there was 5 different sections and you had 20 minutes to do each section. So you could kind of do them whenever over a 2-day period, which was different. But I think, overall it was a fairly smooth transition for me. Oh, and for next year, Bucknell hasn't really said much. So I'm assuming that we're still on for now, which is the hope. But they've been keeping us posted fairly regularly.
So I think I'm in a bit of a unique situation because I was on the quarter system. I never went to any of my classes that I'm taking right now. I was going on spring break when they announced we were going remote, so I've actually never met any of my professors or anyone in my classes. So that's been a bit interesting because one of the things I definitely enjoy about college is you make friends in your classes and you form study groups, and I can't do that because I don't know who's in my classes. All of my classes are non-synchronous, which means that the lectures are just posted. And I would say my friends at school have had all different experiences. So this is just my experience, but every single one of my classes is either papers, projects, or open note tests. So pretty much nothing is like a test on the Respondus browser, which some people are doing, where you actually have to just put everything aside like a normal classroom test. So I've enjoyed that aspect of it because I do find that part of school a bit annoying and not like the real world. I'd say my professors have done a good job of making themselves available to us through Zoom office hours. And my TAs have been extremely communicative and emailing us like all the time, which is not normal. And then in terms of going online for next quarter, UCLA administrators have been saying some things to the press about us possibly going online. And I think yesterday they told the faculty that it is extremely possible that we're online for the fall.
Yeah, in terms of the transition to Zoom, I mean, the classes I was taking were, just to give you guys like a real sense of what the deal was, I was taking a Spanish class, which you met every day, and like person-to-person interaction was huge because you're trying to learn how to speak a language. So that was just, but at the same time, I think that was one of the easiest transitions in terms of online because we would just get on a big Zoom conference call and our professor would share screen her presentation and then it would just kind of be like the same thing, just talking to people on Zoom. And then I was taking a once a week like lecture class that was just based off readings. So that was very similar as well. The ones that got challenging was I was taking actually a lab that was this architecture class, and it was a lot of like hands-on stuff, doing like lab exercises and then having to write reports. That kind of just turned into us watching videos on someone else doing the lab and then writing the reports, which was too bad because it kind of got rid of the fun of the class. And then the last course I was taking is math, which was just a lot of watching somebody write the notes on a screen instead of on a blackboard. And then in terms of exams, I have my two of my exams, one tomorrow and one on Saturday, and they're both open note tests that you just have X amount of time to do, and it's just operating on the honor system that you'll do it in that time. And then the other classes were just like papers and stuff. So in terms of the transition, it is what it is. I mean, it's much less ideal than being there. And in terms of like work ethic, it's a lot harder to push yourself when you're not around everybody else doing the same thing. I'd say that's probably the biggest transition, is like being in school and like seeing everybody else working hard and like going to the library. It just makes you want to work hard, but being at home makes it a little more challenging to do that. And then in terms of next year, Princeton has committed to not pushing the school year back. So whether we're online or not, we're starting in September. They've made all the professors plan as if we're going to be online, just so that they're prepared. But in terms of the final decision, they said they're going to make it in July. So
For me, I'm actually 2 weeks into summer school already. So the transition from spring semester and finishing spring semester at home was kind of a lot of just about like how to take a test. And a lot of them ended up being open notes, or I've had some friends who have had to like be on a Zoom with their professor while they took the test to make sure they weren't cheating. A lot of honors policy kind of things going on right now. But for my summer classes, I've definitely seen the professors have a lot more time on their hands than when they were actually teaching lectures. So office hours are offered all day. If you just email them, they'll hop on a Zoom with you. Like, they're definitely like email you every day, like, this is where you should be, this is what I'm hoping you guys are doing, like checking in. So they've been definitely very helpful with trying to keep everybody up on pace. And for next fall, we've actually officially, our president was on CNN yesterday, said we're back on the fall. So they've already ordered like thousands of extra beds. They're planning out the whole housing situation for people who need to isolate, and what that might look like if we have to all wear masks on campus. We're not sure yet. but we have officially come out with the statement that we're all coming back. So we're definitely excited about that.
For me, it was a lot of like being pulled in different directions. So I had two classes that were asynchronous, so I could just watch the lectures whenever. And then my longest class was on a Zoom call. So that was 3 hours of just like sitting there and working through presentations and stuff like that. And then I had another class that was also asynchronous, and so that was kind of easy, and I ended up having like almost all of my tests be open note except for my bio class. We had it in the Respondus browser and we had the webcam, so that was like I think the strictest test I had to take. But a lot of my teachers ended up giving us the option to exempt ourselves from our final depending on like if we were okay with our grades. So it was definitely a challenge, but it did end up getting easier. And like now I know that when I start my summer classes, it's going to be fine doing the whole online thing. In terms of the fall, UConn hasn't said anything. And our most recent update, they just like told us that all of the teachers are fully prepared to go online if need be, or they're looking at different like hybrid programs so that students who are abroad and can't come back to Connecticut can take the classes online, and then whoever's in Connecticut can come back on campus, but they're not making their official decision until June.
Okay, well, thank you, all of you. I see that we're at 5 o'clock. You're all so interesting. I know I could sit here and listen to all of you for another couple more hours, but I promise to get you on your way. And I think for those of you that are listening, if we didn't get to your questions, feel free to email them directly to me, and I'm sure the panelists will be happy to answer any additional questions so I can forward it on to them. But I just want to thank you all for taking this time. Like I said, I know it's a busy time finishing up your courses, and I wish you all the best as you finish your classes. Have a good summer, and wish you all the best. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.